As early as 8000 BC, humans discovered that pots made of clay would become durable when fired to high temperatures in shallow pits and primitive kilns. While technology has allowed firing techniques to evolve to more convenient and efficient methods, potters still choose to wood fire in order to achieve the unique results only wood firing can produce.
We wait all year long till it's time for the next wood firing. We prepare pots all year, and so we have a little stash for when the wood firing's coming to produce a product that you can't get pretty much any other way in ceramics. So it's really a fun process. We never really know what the flame and the glaze combination is going to do, so it's a surprise every time we open the kiln.
This is the beginning of the process. The pots have been made, the pots have been glazed and decorated, wadded and prepared for the firing. You can break this down really into 3 parts, I think. So load one weekend, fire the next weekend, then a week for the kiln to cool down, and then we unload the 3rd weekend. The loading day is probably the most involved, where the right pot's going to go in the right place in the kiln. There's 3 chambers to the kiln. The first chamber is only fired with wood. The 2nd and 3rd chamber also get salt and soda put into them, which gives the pots even more of a varied surface. The work is going to pick up a lot of its character from the atmosphere inside the kiln and the clay and the glaze's interaction with the fire. Every piece has its own unique character, its own unique relationship with the fire that it has with the fire, and that gets recorded on the pot. You put the right pot in the right spot everywhere in the kiln, which is obviously impossible, but we do our best to do it. Certain glazes work better in the salt side and certain glazes work better in the wood side. In the kiln, there's volatile salts, potassium. Those things would all stick the pots to the kiln shelves. Everything would stick together. So we make a special clay wadding that then allows the pots to come separate from each other. Sometimes they're wadded touching each other on purpose to leave marks, and that way they come separated. So the wadding is basically protecting all the pots. Different kilns fire for different amounts of time. This style of kiln, called Naborigama, which is climbing kiln, it climbs up a hill and has 3 chambers, is an extremely efficient kiln in terms of a wood kiln. At the end of the firing, we seal up the hole, every crack where cold air could come in, because you don't want cold air hitting the pots as they're cooling, or it could actually shatter them. We take newspaper and coat it with clay, and we seal up all the little gaps and all the little holes, because the kiln still wants to pull. Once the chimney's hot, it's pulling. It's like the engine of the kiln. And even though you stop stoking it and you shut down the kiln, that column of hot air still wants to keep pulling on the kiln. So we cover that in 2 places to stop it from pulling, and then we seal anywhere from cold air getting sucked into the kiln, and then we just let the kiln sit for a week. So we're going to burn this pile in addition to a big piece of this pile right here. Oh, of course, you always want to have extra. There's nothing worse than almost getting to temperature and starting to run out of wood. I would be like tearing apart sheds and like finding wood anywhere I could get it to get that kiln to temperature. Once you get to a certain point, maybe 1600 degrees, we'll begin reducing the kiln, which means we'll take away the oxygen from the kiln. The fire gets rich and kind of smoky and thick, and this has a huge effect on what the clay and glazes are going to look like. It's intuitive, understanding when to put more wood in, how much more wood to put in. So you're really following the fire. We have a pyrometer. We use a pyrometer. I don't love them. I really like to be more in tune with the fire itself than necessarily looking at this digital output. Though it is helpful to communicate with the different people. Okay, we're 400 degrees now. We don't want to go past that, whatever. But I really like to follow the fire, watch the fire, and use that to decide when to put more wood in, how much more wood. And then it becomes extremely important. How much wood are we putting in and how often are we putting it in? So a set would be like this. These 2 together will be a set. And they'll sit in the kiln where we can see them. And this is how we tell the temperature. This first one is 010. So this is that one around 1500 degrees, somewhere in there. That's when we'll start reducing, when this starts to bend over. These melt in order by temperature, time and temperature. But I like to use 010, cone 1. I think I have cone 4, cone 6, cone 8, cone 9, cone 10, and cone 11. Cone 10 is really our target cone, but we like to melt cone 11 as well. So as these melt, we'll know the temperature, we'll know that our glazes are melting. The difference between this and, say, a thermometer or a pyrometer is that these are actually reacting with time and temperature in the same way that our materials are reacting in the kiln. And it literally starts as 3 little campfires on the outside, and then they get pushed in and built up as they heat up. When the chimney of the kiln starts to warm up, it turns into a rising column of hot air that's then pulling on the front here. And once it really gets going, you can really see it pulling the fire in, and actually almost like somebody was blowing on it. So there's 3 little places where a fire started. Then we stoked there for a good 6 hours, and then we move up and start putting wood into the side on the grate bar, which is where most of the wood goes into the kiln. But so the first chamber and all of its energy, its residual energy that goes into the rest of the kiln, this is the main engine of the kiln. So at the top here, it's cone 12 flat, which is in that neighborhood, and then the back and bottoms are what's called cone 11, which that's in the 2370 neighborhood. 12's probably 2385 or somewhere in that neighborhood. So we can see when they're melting. So they melt and act the way our material's acting in that time and temperature. I have 3 spots on this chamber where we placed the cones when we were loading. This is what I call the top, but it's also the front. So this is the hottest spot because it's closer to the source of the fire, and it's also the highest up. And then this I call the middle, and then this I call the bottom. This is, the coolest spot, not by a whole lot, because the cone 11 is all the way melted over. And then we do salt and soda in chambers 2 and 3. We do more or less the same thing in those 2 chambers. And what that means is an addition of, we're using baking soda, just Arm & Hammer baking soda mixed with water that we poured across the boards. And we're gonna stoke that right into the kiln. And then we also use table salt. So this is a board with baking soda smeared across it. And that's just gonna get put right in the kiln. And then, we also do regular table salt, just spread on a board. The fire usually, not every time, but the fire usually changes to blues, purples. Sometimes you see green colors if there's a lot of copper glaze in the kiln. The copper is actually vaporizing into the kiln as well, right off the glazes. So it's real neat when we introduce it. It just makes a really pretty fire, and it's sometimes fun to just play with fire, and that's all right. Just the wood chamber, it goes for a much longer time, and all that time, ash is flying through the kiln and landing on the pots, especially the very early portion of the fire. We were actually shaking it up to get ashes flying around through the kiln, and they're going to land primarily on horizontal surfaces of the pots. Like think of a vase with a shoulder. It's going to land on that shoulder, maybe inside of a bowl. Sometimes like on the side of a piece it will kind of stick. As the temperature rises in the kiln, it actually gets hot enough that the ash melts, and the ash melts into a rudimentary kind of a glaze. And the longer you fire, the more ash you're going to have, the more it's going to melt. So that just creates more interesting, unusual effects that you just can't replicate in any way. Typically the salt chamber, you see more glossy stuff and maybe more runny, drippy glazes. And then in the wood chamber tends to be a little bit more matte type effects, but with a bunch of different effects depending on the ash and the amount of reduction and the length of the firing. Flashing is another factor that's in the wood. It's actually, there's salt, potassium, stuff like that in the wood vaporizing above cone 6, and then that's giving a flashing effect, which is usually orange to brown type of colors that move from the windward to the leeward side of the pots. One side gets hit more, and then the other side might be lighter. That's the effect of the minerals in the wood vaporizing in the fire and then interacting with the clay. We have these what we call community firings, where the firing is open to different people, anybody to sign up, and they come out and participate and help with the firing and bring their work. Everybody helps load the kiln, fire the kiln, and then with today we're going to be doing the cleanup, and that's a big task to get prepped for the next firing. The pottery's been here for a long time, and a lot of people from this region have come here to enjoy it and make the pots.
This film was produced with a grant from the Frederick Arts Council. Our thanks to Monocacy River Pottery and interviewee Jim Dugan, as well as Potters Guild of Frederick members and interviewee Janet Greer. Video production by Jack Rome.